Hey guys, Jason from Freelance Sound Labs, and in this video I'm going to run over how to actually set up a VST instrument within DrumRack with audio routing, colors for push, and things like that. It's a question I've been personally asked a few times, how do I do this? I've actually provided the solutions over a few years on the Ableton forums, but even I myself sometimes forget the actual steps involved in setting this up. I typically use a template. I don't create that many kits because I have a template that I work with. But occasionally I want to create a new mapping for a new instrument, and I do forget exactly what I've done. So this is kind of for myself as well. First of all, let's have a look at an actual drum rack in action, and then the little tricks in getting that to work for a VST plugin. So if we have a look just under my packs here, I'll just grab a random drum rack. So the drum racks themselves are essentially a device. I mean, in live you've got audio tracks, you've got MIDI tracks, and then you've got drum tracks. So a drum track, especially if you're using the push controller, has a bit of a different layout, a bit of a different way that it operates. So we've obviously got the 16 pads down here. A pad controller can trigger those, and really it's designed to have a sample loaded onto a pad. You hit the pad, triggers the sample. We've then got the sequencer at the top there, so we can then start laying down a drum beat very easily from the push controller. If we go to just a standard MIDI track, we don't get that. We get the standard keyboard layout. We then need to record and sequence it and things like that. So there's a number of reasons why you would want to use a drum rack, especially for a drum plugin, than using a standard MIDI track. So first of all, let's have a look at what happens when we grab a VST instrument. So I'm going to be using battery for this example. Now we can also use Tune Tracks or Superior Drummer, many different types of drum plugins that you might want to use this for. The process is exactly the same. So I'm just going to load up battery just straight onto a track, an empty track here. So creates a brand new track. Just drag that over here. So I'll get rid of this default audio track. So we've got a battery track, and you'll see down here by the layout that Push has that it's just loaded onto a standard MIDI instrument channel. We can still play this. So if I load up my little 606 kit here, we can play that on the keys, but we don't actually have the ability to sequence that using the drum sequencer. So what we want to do is load that into a drum rack. Now this is very easily done by just simply right clicking on the header, go group to drum rack, and now hey presto, it's wrapped inside a drum rack. There's still a little bit of configuration we need to do here. So before we get nailed down into the full-blown multi-channel and colors and things like that, there's what I would call 3 layers to setting this up. So first of all, you've got your basic drum rack setup. So taking the pads from the drum rack, pushing them to the instrument, and then just getting an audio feedback. That's the first step. The second step is coloring and grouping of the actual pads. So coloring the pads all the same color for kicks and snares, but also grouping them into those groups as well. So putting all the groups, all the kicks in one group, all the snares in one group. And then finally, the last step is getting multi-channel audio working. Now that's going to be dependent on the plugin that you're using, if it's got multi-channel outs. But all of this can be done within a drum rack, and then it can actually be saved and recalled at a later date. So very flexible, and by all means you can set yourself up a template as a starter. So let's look at step 1, just getting the actual pads to talk to the VST plugin. So you'll see here that I've got my pads up here. The good thing about this is very, very easy to set up this step. So the first thing we need to do inside the drum rack is open up the chain selector here, and then also open up the input-output view as well. So having a look at the pads here, you'll see that the battery VST plugin is loaded directly onto the C1 pad, and you'll see that it is set to receive the C1 input. What we want to do, if I move this for instance to C#, you'll see it changes, and now it receives C#. Now I can load on, 16 instances of battery here, have one sample within each of these battery instances, and I could probably do it that way. We don't want to do it that way. What we want to do is simply tell all these pads to play all these pads. And there's just one simple change you need to do at this point, and that is to go to the receive drop down, scroll all the way to the top, and then select all notes. So you'll see it's disappeared from being specifically loaded onto that pad, and it is now loaded onto all of these pads. So you'll notice that on my push, nothing's lit up on the pads here. I'm running it off of the USB only because of the it floods the camera. So normally the top section of pads here would be dull lit to say that nothing's been loaded here, and then we would have colors for our pads. What we're going to do is color these pads ourselves. But I can still play this right now. So that's playing all of the individual elements, and I can also move up and down through the range here and play the the notes up higher, the pads up higher and lower. Now for any drum plugin, this is step one done. We can stop right here and we can start sequencing, we can start building a beat and stuff, and this is all that's required for that. If you don't have a push, then you don't really need to focus on coloring the pads. But we're going to step right into step two, which is coloring those pads. So making all the kicks and all the snares and all the hats all matching color, so that visually we can see exactly what pad is going to trigger what from the push surface. So first thing is, normally you can right click and just color a pad. Well, we can't do that because we don't actually have anything loaded on the pads. These are acting as essentially a virtual key input, which is just triggering the battery plugin, the VST plugin. So what we need to do is first select the very first pad. So this is going to be a kick. So what I want to do is just over here in the chain selector, just right click here and go create chain. So this now puts a chain device on this pad, which we can then now use as sort of a virtual layer for the pad. So you'll see that I've got a mute, solo and play button. These actually do nothing because there is no sample to mute. There is no sample loaded on here. So these are actually just placeholders that don't do anything. What we want this chain for here is to give it a name and give it a color. So what I can do is I can rename this to kick, and I can even color this to a color that I want the kick. So if I move off of there now, you'll see that it has now left the color there. And if I want to color this second kick, I can just hold down my control key, or on Macs, hold down your command key, and then just grab the pad, which will duplicate it and drop it where you want it to go. So now we've got two kicks. We've then got a snare, so I'm going to do the same thing again, control, drag. This time I'm going to rename it snare, and this one I'm going to color yellow or green. I'm colorblind, so some of these colors don't appear to me as they appear to you. We've then got a symbol, so again, control drag, change the color on that and rename it. We'll call it a symbol. We'll just go up and do this top layer here. So we've also got a snare there. So the good thing is I can grab that snare. What are we doing? That's a tom. I'm not going to bother renaming, coloring these yet. That's hats. Now I could call that actually a closed hat. That's another tom, so I'll just grab this tom, drag it over here. And you get the gist of it. So we can go through, keep dragging those. Once you've got a few of these actually labeled and colored, I mean, at this point, I've shown you how to color these, but if you want to go to the route of actually grouping things, I wouldn't bother coloring them to start with. Just put on a chain selector, label them all, leave them all as the same color. The second step we want to do is then start to group them. So this is useful for two reasons. One, we can actually apply the same color to multiple elements in a single click. The second is that we can group those so that we can actually apply a discrete audio channel and effects to that particular group of elements, so directly to kicks and directly to snares and things like that. Now, there's also going to be other tricks and things like that involved we can also go into, but this is just going to show you a basic sort of way to set this up. So, looking at how we can group these, all we need to do is select the like elements, so the two kicks here, for instance. Right click on those, so holding down Control, or again Command. Click on the first one, click on the second one. If there were subsequent ones, we could click on those whilst holding Control, and it will just select those. So the same as you would selecting multiple files in your operating system. Then we just right click and then go to Group. And now those have been pushed into their own little DrumRack group, and this has just been labeled DrumRack. So what I'm going to do is relabel this as Kicks. And then for these ones here, if I just select all of them, so if I actually just drag straight up like that, or you can just go Control A, select all. What I want to do is right click on all of those and select this option to color automatically. So what this will do is this will grab the color from the group, the group chain upper level. So you'll see that it grabs the kick color already. If I go back and recolor that back to here, these pads now become this color. So again, with snares, click those two, group those together. We'll put it back to that color. Snares, and then make sure that color automatically is selected. And so forth and so on. So I'll just group these two. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. So I want to create a group. Label that as Tom's. And then select all, color automatically, and we'll change that back to something like that. And so forth and so on. So we would do all of our hats and everything else. Then we would group it up as the final step. And then we would color each group individually. So that's the second step done. So you can see here on push, we've got some nicely colored pads. So I can see what a kick is. I can see my two snares, toms, and we've got hat and a cymbal. So as long as you keep the same type of color format, you know, over all of your kits, I mean, it's a common sort of color format. It's very easy to distinguish, you know, what all of your elements are. This can take a little bit of time to actually color all of these individual boxes and stuff for each kit that you might want to use, but I do it on a per kit basis. So as I load a kit, once I've figured out, yeah, I'd love to use this, I'll spend some time, muck around with it, and then save it. It doesn't take long at all to start building up a decent collection. Okay, so the next step is to then get this working with multiple audio outputs. So let's have a look at how we do that. It's dependent on your plugin. So first of all, you have to figure out how your plugin works with multiple outputs. So in Battery, it's as simple as right-clicking on a pad, going to the output, and then selecting the output. So by default, in pretty much every plugin, everything comes out of your what would be classed as the master channel output, or the master output from the VST, which is channels 1 and 2. So there, what everything is operating, channels 1 and 2. If I come back to my DrumRack here and open this up, you'll instantly see we have our groups across here, all nicely color-coded. Playing all of the channels currently, everything comes through the battery channel, which is channels 1 and 2, the default channels. We want to change the kicks to come through channels 3 and 4. So what I'm going to do is actually highlight the two kicks that I've got. So again, hold down Control, select the first one, then select the second one, and now go to the outputs, direct outputs, and select 3, 4. So instantly, if I play these now, so they're being triggered, but there is no audio coming out. The snares, they'll still work. But yeah, we've lost audio from the kicks because we've told it to go out of an output, but we've got nothing picking up that audio output. The easiest way to do that from this perspective is to put on what's called an external instrument into this rack here. Now, the external instrument is really designed to send MIDI to an external physical instrument in the real world, and then receive audio back from that instrument through a channel on your audio interface and direct it into the channel. So it then becomes a part of the live ecosystem. MIDI goes out, audio comes back in. It pretty much appears as though it is just loaded into the channel. There are other ways to use that external instrument as well. So I'm just going to pull it up at the moment. So if I go into instruments here, you'll see that there is an external instruments folder. We just want to grab the external instrument, just the standard external instrument, and just drag it straight into here. Now, it doesn't matter where it goes in this list here. I personally like to grab it and put it right up the top so it's easily accessible, especially if you've got a large kit which has quite a number of kicks. And then in this external instrument here, we've got two boxes. What we want to do is send the MIDI out to it. I mean, the MIDI is already going to it. We don't really need to worry about that. But we need to select what device we're communicating with, and that's going to be our DrumRack. And then it says what channel within the DrumRack. We're just doing everything on channel 1, so it doesn't really matter. And then what audio do we want to grab from that device? And this will list all of the audio channels that are available. So you can see we can go all the way up to channels 31, 32, so it's 16 channel output we've got to work with. And what I want to do is I want to tell this to work from channel 3, 4. So you'll notice here that I can't select 1, 2, and that's because it knows that channel 1 and 2 are already designated to the instrument itself. So we're going to select an external channel, 3, 4. And now when I play my kick drum, it plays off just as it did. The first thing you'll notice though is that the kicks are coming out of the kick channel in the DrumRack now, whereas all the rest of the elements are coming out of the master channel. This is pretty much just a live channel. If we want to apply some effects to these kicks, we can just let's go into our audio effects. I'll just get a crude one, just go straight here. We're going to get a heavy amp and just chuck it straight on the output. And now we've got effects that apply directly to our kick. Beautiful. Now you can also do your sends, receives, things like that. I won't worry about all of that, but you can send this to one of your return tracks. But look, the question that always normally gets asked is how can I apply a particular EQ to a particular element from, a VST drum rack like this. Hopefully I've shown you exactly how that can be done. So go through and set this up for each of your individual elements. I like to actually just save this all basically as a template. Once you've got the template set up, you just simply move the modules around. One thing that I will give you a little bit of another little bit of advice on is if I come back here. So if we have a look at this, let's say that this one up here is, let's see what this is. Okay, so here's another tom. What I want to do is now add that into the mix. So if I grab my my tom pad, control, drag it, so you'll see that the toms have popped up here. So I've already got a group of toms. So if I select this, you can see here's all my tom pads here. But this one's actually popped up outside of that group. So anything that you try and create a new chain for on a pad will actually pop up outside the group, even if you drag the pad. If I grab this here, for instance, hold control, drag that across and drop it on a pad, it still pops up outside the group. So all you need to do is, if you want to regroup those, just select them, and then just click right on here. If you try and click here and then just start dragging, it just highlights them. So if you just carefully click and then hold the mouse before you start moving, and now move it, hold over the group here. You can just drop it straight on the group. I tend to go straight in here, drop it in there, and hey presto, it's now added to that chain group. The other good thing is it's automatically colored that based on the header. If it's not coloring it automatically, you just need to make sure that it's got color automatically selected. And that's pretty much it. Oh, there goes my my alarm. So that's pretty much it. That's how you actually set up the multi-channel audio, coloring and everything for a VST. Save it as a rack, recall it, and hey presto, it behaves and operates just as it would the samples being loaded directly on the pad. So hopefully this has been useful for you. Let me know if there are any questions. I'll try and answer them. I'm not particularly a full-on expert, but yeah, look, hopefully this has helped you along. I'm sure it will help rejog my memory next time I run into issues. Cheers.